You're watching Agenda, and today's show is coming to you from outside Uphaar Cinema, which is basically a tribute. This entire space has been turned into a memorial for the 59 people who died in the Uphaar fire almost 20 years ago. And why is it on Agenda that we're talking about it today? Well, we're talking about it, one, because a new book has come out now. It's called Trial by Fire. It's written by one of the victims' parents, Neelam Krishnamurthy. She's here with me. She and her husband, Shekhar Krishnamurthy, they formed that association of Uphaar families, and they've done a tell-all in this book. It's one of the most important, most moving books you'll ever read. And why we are doing this show and why it's important for us to document this is because if you've ever gone for a movie, if you've gone to any public space, then you need to read this, because this book tells us how safe we are, and if anything happens to us in a public space, how do we fight to get justice. We also have on the show Mr. R.C. Sharma. Mr. R.C. Sharma used to be the fire chief. He was also one of the witnesses. He was here when Uphaar happened, and his testimony was also used at that time. He'll talk to us about what's changed since then. But first of all, this book, thank you so much, Neelam Krishnamurthy and Shekhar Krishnamurthy, for telling your story, because it's such an important story for all of us as citizens, because it talks about how this case happened, and telling your story, you instruct a lot of us about how things really work in this country. And for anyone who's covered, and anyone who's read papers, the Uphaar story has been a constant. It's the background of perhaps the last 20 years. Things have happened, we've all followed it. But this book gives a lot about behind the scenes. For example, what you say in this book is that it's a case, the Uphaar case is a case which the government, the CBI, was fighting against several influential people, including the Ansals. But what you reveal in this book is that when it went to the High Court and you filed a civil appeal, because for compensation, instead of not just doing a criminal case, you also did a civil case for compensation of all the victims' families in order to set this as an example so that this doesn't happen before. You say that the commission had to pay, the families had to pay for someone to carry out the inquiry. Tell us, how did that happen?
It's very strange that, when the High Court had set up a commission of the court commissioners to actually go to the Uphaar cinema and see what are the deviations and violations, and then give a report to the court so they could proceed with the matter. What had happened was, when the judgment was being delivered, there were about 40 respondents. We were the petitioner, and 40 respondents, Union of India being one, the MCD and the health services, and there were about 25 people from the Ansals, that is the company itself and Ansals. And when they were asked to pay for the commission, all of them refused. Our consul was inside because the judgment was not delivered in an open court. It was delivered inside the judge's chamber. And he was asked, since they had all refused to pay, if the association would bear the expense. And we definitely didn't want to lose this opportunity. And he said, no, the association will bear the expense, why not? And yes, it was the association which bore the expense of the court commissioners.
So imagine you lose your children, or you lose your family member. There are people who lost their entire family, right? There's a person who lost from his 1-month-old granddaughter to the daughter-in-law, to everybody. Seven members of his family. So imagine you've lost everybody, and then you also have to pay 1 lakh rupees for the commission to be set up. We are also joined by KTS Tulsi. Now, why have we called KTS Tulsi? Because KTS Tulsi, as Neelam Krishnamurthy writes in this book, became a friend and a guide for the entire association's family. He worked pro bono. So it's really an honor to have you here speaking to us, KTS Tulsi. Can you explain to us, because the reason why we're doing this show after this book has come up is to understand how we as citizens, how do we guide ourselves and go through this maze of legality, and if something bad happens, how do we go about seeking justice? So like they had to, this thing of paying for a commission of inquiry, which is set up by the High Court, even though it's a state versus the Ansals or state versus Uphaar, is that common that the victims have to pay?
No, this is ridiculous, according to me. There's no question of the victims making people pay for justice, criminal justice, 59 lives lost. And then you say that the state owns no responsibility. It is duty of the state to get justice for the victims. Why should the victims, suppose they were not able to afford, there can be another set of like Dadri.
That's right.
If they are not able to afford, that means they'll not get justice.
So do you think the court said that these are people who live in South Delhi, they are of a certain income group, they can pay? Is that why? Was it arbitrary?
No. Also that the very fact that they were in balcony, that means they are better well-to-do.
You know, I just wanted to point out to our audience members, because this was 20 years ago, so everyone might not know the nitty-gritty. 59 people who died that day, they were all in the balcony. Everybody else escaped because it was one of the doors, because the owners had put in seats. They wanted private seats for themselves. They blocked off the exits, and that's why they were convicted. The Ansal brothers were convicted because of this kind of act. I wanted to just ask you, and Mr. Ashish Sharma, this book reveals lots of details. One of the other things that it reveals is that Uphaar cinema behind me, it hadn't got its license, but the cinema owners were able to get a stay for 4 days.
Right.
And that 4 days stay, they used it for 17 years.
Yeah, correct.
So, sir, does this happen even now when we are all going to cinemas and multiplexes? Could it be that they don't have a license and they're still open to all of us to watch movies?
I don't think so, because now everybody is scared of this thing, because something has happened. Once it happens, then at least you know that things can go up to that level if something goes wrong. So that time, because license is issued by, say, licensing department, Delhi police in that case at that time. So naturally, they were having NOC from other 3, 4, 5 departments like MCD, fire department and others, electricity and other things. And then they were the authority to issue license. If everybody is clear, then they are supposed to do. But again, this court stay and other things are again, they are the part of our life. I mean, we have been going through that. And probably, yes, if we don't really follow it up, or if we just keep quiet, then probably things go on like that.
Imagine how the parents felt that this, and why was the license not given, and why was it withheld by the licensing department?
See, in 1983 there was a fire at Gopala Towers, and after that, because since the Lieutenant Governor's son-in-law had also got trapped in that fire at a building in
the previous fire,
yes,
which should have sent alarm bells running.
So then they ordered to see if the high-rise buildings in Delhi were safe, and that's when they found that this was one building which wasn't really safe enough. And they had pointed out about 11 deviations and violations. So there were a lot of other cinema halls, and then they went to the High Court. The DCP licensing it cancelled their license. They went for a stay.
So imagine knowing that your children would have been safe if the Delhi police had been vigilant enough.
Yeah. The 11 deviations what Neelam spoke about, which they pointed out in 1983, existed even in 97.
On the day of
all the deviations.
Yes, my question is, how did they get an NOC? Now, how did they get the permit to run the cinema hall?
Now, you know, Mr. R.C. Sharma says that now we are much safer, and I think the point of the show is just that. It happened in 97. Do you feel, you go to, I don't know if you've been to a cinema.
I've never visited a cinema after that. No, I don't have the...
But the High Court, when it gave out the civil, when it settled the civil suit, it also gave directions of what all cinema halls or public spaces must have. Do you think, Mr. Tulsi, all of that has been adhered to?
Nothing. I think the situation is just the same. If you go to Old Delhi, you will see all kinds of violations, not why Old Delhi, even South Delhi, North Delhi, everywhere. You see, the thing is that in India, the law enforcement agencies are at the bidding of the high and the mighty. The rich people think nothing of the civil servants, and they think they can be bought. And if in this case, for instance, a license is being issued on a Sunday, license is being issued by an official when he is on leave, so they just give blank licenses signed by the authority, and they can
that happened
periodically.
Is it still happening again?
It happens even now.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Yeah.
The sir said that the instructions are not being followed right now also. So we being the citizens, what we can do for that? Like, how can we come to know that what exactly the...
What would you tell her since you've become an expert at fighting it now?
I think what is very important when you visit a space like this, you have to ensure that the area where you have gone in, I think any of you, you're all educated people, and you can see you entered the place. Suppose in a case of an emergency, are there exits available for you? Suppose something happens, are there exits leading to a staircase? So what I've understood today in the multiplexes, although I haven't really gone there, but I've understood the topography, I actually think they're very unsafe because there's just one staircase which is leading up to all the halls. I shudder to think if there is a bomb hoax also, or if there is a fire, people from all those halls would come down from the staircase.
Very true.
Nobody's actually thought about it.
And I think what
So
this
how do we
book
deal with
forces
that?
us to do is just to become much more aware, start thinking about that. We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, how even though you've lost your family, your children, how when you go to fight the case, how the lawyers of the other side abuse you. That's what we're going to ask Neelam Krishnamurthy about. That's what she reveals in this book. So stay tuned for more on that.